David, who's made the running on this story, is with us now. So let's talk first about Stephen Barclay, the Health Secretary. He's entered into this now. What's he been saying?
Well, soon after our initial report, the local MP, Preet got in touch with Mr Barclay, the Health Secretary. She was concerned, among many concerns she had, one of which was that she was concerned that the reviews that had been announced by the NHS weren't going to be rigorous or independent enough. Last night, the Health Secretary sent her a reply. To quote from it, he says, I share your concerns about the reports of poor culture at University Hospitals Birmingham Foundation Trust. It's clear that lessons must be learned and that the issues raised by those who have spoken up about their experiences should be acted upon. He says NHS England will be overseeing those reviews to make sure they do get at the truth. And later in the letter he says, to quote, he will consider, quote, closely the outcomes of these collective processes. A hint there, I think, that if he is unhappy with what those reviews come up with, then he will take further action.
Now, we've spoken about these 26 doctors referred to the General Medical Council, but presumably from the hospital's point of view, if they've got serious concerns about a doctor and the way they're doing their job, they've surely got to investigate that, haven't they?
Indeed. I mean, doctors being referred to the GMC and no action being taken, that isn't in and of itself evidence that that referral was in any way illegitimate or vexatious. I'm sure patients would want to know that if there is a hint that a doctor may be in any way unfit, then the authorities will take that very seriously. And however senior a clinician, as John Watkinson there, very eminent surgeon, that can't be any sort of barrier to that sort of scrutiny. And as we mentioned in the report, 2/3 of employer referrals to the GMC result in no action being taken. Where UHB seems to be an outlier is that none of the 26 referrals to the GMC resulted in any action. The allegation, and it's being examined by one of those 3 reviews, is that those referrals are part of a bullying or intimidatory culture. We should say that the Trust, of course, denies that. They say their referrals are always based primarily and overwhelmingly on patient concerns.
David, thank you very much. Well, earlier we spoke to Labour MP, Preet Gill, and I started by asking her about the 3 different inquiries, just mentioned by David there, underway, and whether she was confident that this would produce better outcomes for patients.
Whilst I was calling for an independent inquiry, which is what I wrote to the Secretary of State about, he's obviously agreed with what the Interim Care Board have negotiated, which is the first review that Professor Buick will undertake, which is around patient safety. Of course, that is important. Whilst many doctors want an independent review, pretty much like Mid Staffordshire, what I want to assure them is, because I am chairing the cross-party reference group that sits alongside this review, and I've met with Professor Buick just before Christmas, I am assured that he will try and do his utmost to make sure there are a number of voices that are included as part of the first review. He isn't part of UHB. Of course, he's not from the region. And so I'm hoping that that level of independence, but of course, the cross-party reference group holding him to account as well as the chief executive of the Integrated Care Board will give some assurances to those that have been whistleblowing with myself.
Right. So, and just in layman's terms, you're involved with the first one, and your role, how would you define your role? Is it essentially just to make sure that justice is done and to provide that kind of critical scrutiny?
Well, there's going to be 3 reviews. So the first review is, of course, on patient safety. That's really important. The report should be out mid-February. So the timeline for this is very, very quick. I want to make sure that the board, the cross-reference party group that I am chairing, is actually going to be involved not just now for this initial review, but of course it will be for the subsequent ones looking at governance and culture.
Is this going to successfully deal with the issue? Because we understand that a number of the whistleblowers have already been in touch to say they're not happy with this process.
Well, look, they have. And what I've done and what part of the chairing of the cross-party reference group is being a conduit, making sure that all of those that have whistleblown, I've written to them and given them the opportunity to meet with Professor Buick. That meeting is going to go ahead very shortly. And that means that Professor Buick will get to hear a number of senior sort of voices from within the trust across all of the sites. But of course, this is not just consultants, it's not just junior doctors, it's nurses, it's matrons, it's really, really across the board. So making sure that we have patient voice, families, everybody that wants to be able to be heard will be able to contribute to this.
Now, the Trust have given us a statement this evening pointing out that patient safety is their number one priority, despite the challenging pressures on the NHS. And they've also denied that there have been referrals to the GMC as a bullying tactic. They absolutely don't accept that point and say there were serious reasons given for the actions taken against one doctor in particular. They're clearly going to defend their position. Do you think their defence will hold up?
Well, look, what lots of doctors are saying to me when I've spoken up to them, they say they are the clinicians, they are the experts. And of course, when they are raising patient safety, they are being ignored. And they know that not much has changed, even despite the CQC coming in and issuing, warnings and now coming in to take enforcement action. Even that hasn't resulted change. So I can absolutely understand that people are a little bit sceptical. What I don't want to see the trust do is take a defensive approach. They've got to be open, engaging and transparent as much as possible. They've got to wait to see what the findings of the first review are. In my view, there's been a clear failure of leadership, a failure of governance and a failure of regulation. There are some very quick things that we can do to give confidence back to the 22,000 staff that are employed here at the University Hospital Birmingham. And the very first thing in my mind is that each of the sites has got to have its own directors and executive board so people can feed into it, they can recruit locally, and communication can be done much more effectively.
Preet Gill, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Newsnight.